Hey guys, welcome back into another Warframe video, and today I'm going to show you guys a straightforward video of my two straightforward Mirage Prime builds. I will be showing you guys a DPS or a Hall of Malevolence build, in short HOM, and the other one would be a Prism stun build. It's sort of a tribute to those Law of Retribution builds, but heavily modified. Anyway, in this video I'm going to cover 4 things: the skill guide, the builds themselves, synergies, and some demonstration. As we all know, Mirage is one of the best Warframes in Warframe. She possesses some really good DPS and crowd control abilities, and also the ability to make any weapon overpowered and broken. Now let's take a look at her passive. I'm pretty sure a lot of people disregard it, but Jester's proficiency basically makes Mirage slide longer and also to have a faster maneuver speed. Basically, you'll be able to dodge, roll, or bullet jump much more faster. Now let's take a look at her first ability, which is called Hall of Mirrors. Of course, what this ability does is that it will spawn in 4 mirror images, or I could just say clones of Mirage herself. These clones will mirror every action that you do. When you fire projectiles or bullets from your primary or your secondary weapons, 2 holograms will also do the same. And if you're using a melee weapon, especially those with glaives, gun blades, or Zenistar, all 4 of these holograms or clones will do the same. They will all deal damage. Now, these holograms will only inherit 40% of your total damage. But it's not really a big deal, because the main reason why we use this ability is just to make a weapon more fun, more powerful, and even more broken. For example, let's talk about the Cyanide Similo. Assuming that you know how this weapon works, when you use this weapon on its own, you will need around 4 or 3 orbs to make a singularity, which are these vortex thingies. But if you use Hall of Mirrors, you'll be able to create a singularity with 1 or maybe 2 shots. It also helps you to merge your orbs multiple times, which in return can give you some pretty good DPS. And when you talk about the weapons like the Zenistar, what happens is that when you charge attack with this weapon, instead of launching out 1 disc, it will do 5, which allows it to cover even more area, and also possibly to create more crowd control, because the Zenistar is a CC weapon after all. And finally, let's talk about the other use of Hall of Mirrors. It can distract enemy fire. The one thing I'm not sure about is whether your threat level is the same as your hologram. But because the enemies have like 5 targets to choose from instead, you probably won't die that easily, because enemies will target your clones instead of you. Next, we have Sleight of Hand. TLDR, this is a booby trap ability. This ability will do 2 things. Depending on the intensity of light, it will spawn in 2 kinds of jewels. If it's placed in a well-lit area, the jewel will become a light one, and what it does is that when enemies come in contact with it, it will deal some blast damage towards it. And if you place it in a dark area, it will spawn this black jewel. And what this does is that when enemies come in contact with it, it will stun them. It's similar to Excalibur's Radial Blind. And the second usage of this ability is what I mentioned just now, booby traps. The thing about this ability is that it can alter a lot of things. The list is extremely long. If you want to read all of this for yourself, then you can check out the link in the description below. This ability is underrated, but at the same time, it kinda sucks. I like that it doesn't just do crowd control, but it also does map control. But this ability is kinda disappointing because it couldn't do much. At the same time, it's also quite detrimental to gameplay. I like the fact that it can make some containers into stun, bomb traps, and lockers, which becomes a proximity mine. But I hate the fact that it makes pickups explode, as in ammo, health, energy, or affinity orbs. The moment you need those energy orbs but you accidentally press 2, it's gone. So DE, please buff this ability. And next, we have Eclipse. This one is pretty simple. Unlike those 2 other abilities, this one is much more straightforward. If you're standing in a well-lit area, it will give you damage bonus, and this bonus is actually quite a lot. Up to 500% if you have a good build. And if you're standing in a dark area, you will get a self-damage reduction, which is up to 95% if you have a good build. This ability synergizes with your first one, which is Hall of Mirrors. If you have Hall of Mirrors active with this ability too, all of your damage would be bumped up a lot, and your end result will be a much more higher DPS. And finally, we have Prism, which is that stun ability which has died a long time ago. When you cast this ability, it will spawn in a disco ball. that actually shoots lasers. These lasers will randomly target enemies and it will deal a lot of damage. The damage of these lasers also depends on where you're standing. If you're in a well-lit area, these lasers will deal maximum damage, but if you're standing in a dark area, your lasers will only have half of its maximum damage. Or when you press 4 again, you will manually detonate this prism, and what it does is that it will stun enemies nearby. But the stun is actually affected by line of sight, so if enemies are behind cover, you can't stun the ones that are behind cover. You can only stun the ones that are visible by the prism, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So before we go into the builds, let me just remind you what these two builds are for and which abilities are they focused on. The DPS or your Hall of Malevolence build will be focused on your third and your first ability. I know that's a weird order of numbers, right? And then your Prism build will be focused on your second and your fourth ability. I'll explain why later. But first, let's take a look at the first build. Now as you can see, this is pretty straightforward. It's a 1 FORMA build, and by the looks of it, it's really focused on damage and duration. So let's take a look. We have power strength mods which are Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, Intensify, and Power Drift. What these mods will do is that it will boost your Hall of Mirrors damage and also your Eclipse's damage buff. If you have this much power strength, you'll be able to reach almost 600% damage buff with your Eclipse, and you will get 95% damage reduction with your Eclipse when you're standing in a dark area. And that's actually pretty much it. Next we have Hall of Malevolence, which is actually the most important thing in this build. What this augment does is that whenever you kill an enemy, it will add up 5% damage bonus to your Hall of Mirrors, and it will keep stacking until you get 50% max. This augment is really useful if you want to further boost your weapon damage, and the good thing about it is that you automatically raise your DPS whenever you kill more enemies. Next we have power duration mods, which are Auger Message and Prime Continuity. What these mods will do is that it will keep your Eclipse and your Hall of Mirrors alive and active as long as possible. With this much power duration, you'll be getting around 50 plus seconds of Hall of Mirrors and Eclipse. Finally, we have Vitality, which is for survivability purposes. And that's pretty much it. Now let's keep this simple. How are you going to utilize this build? First of all, please use an overpowered weapon with this build. For example, the Synod Simulaw, the Static Core, the Catch One Kit Gun, anything that is overpowered to you. Or even the Azima, it works great, or the Zenista. If you use this weapon in tandem with Hall of Mirrors and Eclipse, it would basically buff your damage a shit ton, and when you try to kill an enemy, it becomes much more easier, especially when dealing with bosses or tough enemies. And because you're shooting out more projectiles than usual, weapons like Synod Simulaw would really benefit from your Hall of Mirrors. And weapons like the Catch One Kit Gun, which is already broken, and when you use this build, it will be even more broken, even more strong, and more fun to use. But I think it really is up to you. This DPS build is basically for you to play around with any weapons and to make them even more stronger. As I said, this is a pretty straightforward build. And now let's go over to the second build, which is just a for fun kind of build. It's used in low level missions where you actually use a prism to kill enemies, maybe up to level 50. Alright, let's go through the build. First of all, we have some power efficiency mods, which are Fleeting Expertise and Streamline. I hope you know what this all does because it's pretty obvious what we're going to use this build for. Next, we have power duration mods, which are Prime Continuity and Narrow Minded. There are two purposes for these power duration mods. First of all, the same as power efficiency mods here, to reduce the energy drain on your prism, and also, we want your traps and your prism to be active as long as possible. That's pretty much it. And next we have power strength mods, which are Transient Fortitude, Augur Secrets, and Umbral Intensify. Again, they serve two purposes here. First of all, it's to counter the negative power strength from overextended, and also, it's to boost your damage from prism and to also boost the effectiveness of your booby traps, as well as to make your Eclipse and your Hall of Mirrors to be more satisfactory, because you're probably going to keep all 4 abilities active when you use this build. Finally, we have Overextended and Cunning Drift, which is our power range mods. Very obvious, you need to extend the range of your lasers for Prism, and also when you cast your second ability, you'll be able to put down traps further from you. Now the use is again pretty straightforward and very obvious for this build. You want to keep all 4 abilities active. Wherever you go, press 2. When you see enemies, press 4. When you see both containers and enemies, press 2 and 4. Hotel, Trivago. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Why the hell would someone make a Mirage Prime build with all stats to be positive? Usually you will see a very imbalanced build like the previous one, which is solely for DPS purposes. This build right here is for fun. It's for you to actually make your second ability more useful. And now let's go through the last thing, the demonstration. I will only show demonstrations for your first build with your Sand of Similor and the Static Core against level 100 heavy gunners and bombards. Let's get started.
You say those things, then shut me out.
Alright guys, that's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for watching this video. Now I made this video spontaneously, which means everything that I have said in this video, whether I have gone off topic or not, everything is just at the top of my head. Except for the abilities part, because I was referring to Warframe wiki while just covering her abilities. But still, I would count this as spontaneous because a lot of the points I just talk about is pretty much made on the go. So I'm really sorry if I have went off topic anywhere in the video. I'm trying to improve myself in terms of voiceovers, so I hope you guys can bear with me. Anyway, if you guys like this video, then be sure to leave a like, write a nice comment, and please consider subscribing. If you want to buy me a cup of coffee, you can check out my Ko-fi page in the link in the description below. As usual, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Catch you guys in another Destiny 2 video. Later guys.